Welcome to today's video. I'm so happy you're here. And today I thought we could tier rank every single book that I've ever given 5 stars. So I worked out that we have 21 books in total. Now I've been reading since 2022 and I feel like it's only natural as we grow and evolve that our book taste is also going to change. So I thought it'd be really interesting to see whether I still think all the 5 stars are actual 5-star reads. And I have a feeling that might not be the case for every single one, because I feel like as well when I was first getting into reading, when I found a book that I absolutely loved, I was probably more inclined to give it 5 stars, more so than I am now. I feel like I've kind of got a bit stricter with my rating, but I don't know, we'll see how it goes. So I have my laptop here and I've created my tiers. We have 5 tiers altogether. So first of all, I'm going to talk you through my tiers and what they actually mean. At the bottom we have product of its time. So this would be a book most likely from my early days of reading, where back then when I read it, it was 5 stars, and probably now if I reread it, it probably wouldn't be a 5-star read. But again, take that with a pinch of salt, because I feel like I would have to actually reread it now to actually confirm that for definite. But we've got product of its time. Above that we've got 4-star in disguise. So this means so this is a book that I enjoyed so much and I had the best time reading it that I gave it 5 stars purely based on enjoyment level. But if we're being completely honest, it was probably more likely a 4-star read, but because I enjoyed it so much at the time, I was probably on a book high when I read it, so then I rated it 5 stars. But if we're truly looking at it as a book as a whole, it's probably more likely a 4-star. So there we've got 4-star in disguise. And then above that we have a solid 5 stars. So this is pretty self-explanatory. It's just a 5-star, nothing more, nothing less. And a book that I still think now, yep, that's a 5-star. Above that we have Still Think About. So this is a bit more than a 5-star. This is a book that I literally can't get out of my brain. It's consumed me in some type of way. And it's a book that I absolutely love. But then above that we have I'd Give It Infinite Stars if I could. These are my all-time favourite books. This is a book that has literally taken over my entire being. Most likely these books will have characters in that just feel so real to me, and it feels like I know them, or it's a world that I just absolutely love. And these are just my all-time favourite books, and books that probably took over my life for a short time after I finished reading them. Okay, so there we have our tiers. At the bottom here we have all the 5 stars that I've ever rated. So the first one we have is Icebreaker. Now I absolutely loved Icebreaker at the time that I read it. It definitely is one of those books that has no plot, it's pure vibes. And it's one of those where I loved both Anastasia and Nate. I know some people say that Anastasia is really annoying, but I personally really liked her. I liked this book was fun and sort of lightweight, but it also had a deeper side to it, and these characters also had other stuff that they were dealing with, and I really liked that. I really love the whole uni campus vibe that this whole series actually has going on. I love that. I love being in that world, and it's something, having been a uni student, that I related to. I just like where it was set, and I like the group of characters that there were as well. But I think purely based on the lack of sort of plot that there was, I know that there is a plot, but it is mainly vibes. I would probably say this was a 4-star in disguise, just because I absolutely loved it at the time that I was reading it, and I think because of how much I was obsessed with it for that short amount of time, that's why I rated it 5 stars. But if we're being a bit harsher and a bit more critical with it, I would probably say that was a 4-star book in disguise. Next up we have The Silent Patient. Now The Silent Patient is one of the first psychological thrillers that I read back when I actually started getting into reading, and this was one of the books that actually got me into reading, and it made me realise how good psychological thrillers can be and how you can just become so gripped by a book. I feel like I hadn't really experienced that much until I read this. This is also one of those that I read 2 years ago now, and I would love to reread it, but it's one that I won't have the same experience with because I obviously know what happens in it, and it definitely is one that has stuck with me. But I think that's also based on the fact that I read it so early on. So I think for this one I would have to actually reread it probably, because right now I can't even imagine like what the writing style was like. I can just remember the twist and how my jaw was literally on the floor. So for now I'm going to put this as solid 5-star. I think it still has the potential to be a 5-star. I think if I could reread it now and re-experience it for the first time without knowing what happens, I think I probably would still rate it 5-star, but it's probably not going to be any more than that. Okay, next we have Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alston. This is another one that I read really early on, and I just absolutely loved it. I loved it. I just thought it was really funny and relatable, and I just really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed this book. This is another one that I would love to reread at some point. This is another one of the books that really got me into reading. And to be honest, I still feel like this is a solid 5-star. I still feel like I would enjoy this now. And when I finished reading this, I did think about it a lot, but that's not so much the case as time goes on, and as I found other books that I literally can't get off my brain. This one's a solid 5-star, but I probably don't think about this anymore. Next we have Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. This is the only Colleen Hoover book that I've rated 5 stars, and the thing that got me about this book was Miles as a character. I just remember being absolutely obsessed with Miles. I loved him, which is funny when I say that because when I remember stuff about him now, I'm like, I probably wouldn't think that if I read that now. So I'm confused. I'm confused about my feelings towards this book. It probably is my favourite Colleen Hoover book that I've read, and it did stick with me for a while after I'd originally read it. I think I also liked the fact that it was a romance, but there was more to it and it was quite dramatic. And I liked the fact that I found it more interesting as a romance because of all the drama surrounding it and their sort of dark backstories that they have. There is one scene in this that I remember with him and the main girl, and I just think, how did I ever like him? When I think about that scene now, I think, how was he one of my favourites? But I'm obviously forgetting all the sort of good stuff from his character as well. But that scene really stuck with me because I remember when I read that I was like, what did you just say? What did you just say? But I did rate this 5 stars. I'm probably now going to put this in Project of its Time because I think at the time it was exactly what I needed to sort of get me into reading. This was also another one of the books that I read early on, and I clearly loved it at the time. And like I said, I really liked Miles as a character. But if I was to read that now, I just don't think it would hit the same. Next up we have Every Last Word by Tamara Islandstone. Now, this book, when I originally finished this book, I rated it 4 stars, and then I literally could not get it off my brain. Like, I could not stop thinking about it. It's a book that I still think about to this day, so I moved it up to 5 stars because I just thought it deserved that, and I genuinely still think about it. And there's one moment in this book that I was so... I don't even know how to explain it. The feeling that that moment gave me is like nothing I've experienced before. And even since then, I've not had that with another book. And I remember it literally like it was yesterday. I was in my uni room and I couldn't put this book down. I think I was halfway through or maybe 2/3 the way through. And there'd been a bit of drama in the book and it had kind of settled down. Bear in mind, this is at like 2 a.m, 3 a.m. in the morning, and I'm in my dark uni room with only like one light on by myself. So all this drama was kicking off in the book, and then it sort of simmered down a bit, and I sat there and thought, I'm just going to read one more chapter, just one more before I go to bed. And this was the chapter that had the whole thing in, and when I tell you I had chills, I literally was kind of freaked out, but in a good way, if that's even possible. I literally couldn't believe what I was reading. I like got full body shivers because I was like, oh my, what on earth have I just read? And it's one that after that, I obviously couldn't just go to sleep. I obviously couldn't. And I think I finished the book literally that same night. And that feeling that I had when I read that chapter, I've literally not been able to recreate with another book. So this book is definitely one that I still think about. I don't think I'd give it infinite stars if I could. It's definitely one that still plays on my mind. It's just a really good book, and it's one that I really want to reread at some point. And I think it deserves more than just 5 stars. Moving on to Happy Place by Emily Henry. This book I got through so quickly. This was my first Emily Henry book that I read. I read it in summer, I think 2023, and it was exactly what I needed at the time. I remember loving the way Emily Henry tells a story and how there are sort of deeper meanings and life messages that she puts throughout, and not really in a overly cringy way as well. I like that. I really liked Harry and Wyn in this, and I felt like I was just rooting for them the whole time, but I also really liked the fact that this book concentrated on friendships and not just on romantic relationships. It kind of focused on all types of connections, and I really liked that about this book. I think I'd rate this a solid 5 star. Really enjoyed it. It's not one that I tend to think about a lot, but it's my favourite Emily Henry book that I've read so far, and I just think it's a solid 5 star. Next we have If He Had Been With Me by Laura Nowlin. If you've watched any of my videos, you'll know how much I absolutely love this book. I love how nostalgic this book feels. I love Finny and Autumn. I think they're so sweet. I love the sort of representation of first love, and it's also got one of my favourite tropes in, which I don't really know the name of this trope, but it's sort of when they're destined to be together and they're like soulmates and the universe is just going to keep pushing them back together. Whatever that trope is, that's probably my favourite trope of all time, and this book has that in. It's also childhood friends to lovers. It's got the growing up part where they grow up individually and they evolve, but then they're also brought back together, and it's also got the sad side. Now, I'm a sucker for a sad book. I don't know what it is. I love a sad story, and just the ability for a book to have that much of an emotional effect on me, like to have a book that you just feel so connected with, that it's really just pulling on your heartstrings. I'm obsessed. And this was definitely a heart-wrenching book for me. I know that a lot of people kind of don't like it because the first chapter sort of tells you what happens, but when you actually get to that point in the book and when you actually read it, you'll realise that it's not what you originally thought. And that's why I think it works, because you think it's one thing and then it just turns out to be something else and you're like, it really just sends your head spinning. And I love that in a book. I love a book that can really play with my emotions. Don't know what that says about me, but there we go. So I'm gonna give this infinite stars. I would genuinely give this infinite stars if I could. It's one of my all-time favourite books, and I think it will always have a special place in my heart, and it is one that I want to reread and go and annotate, because I read this at a time when I hadn't started annotating my books. So I'd really like to do that at some point. And then I guess we will see if I'd still give it as high a rating as I have done. Next up we have Family of Liars by E. Lockhart. This is actually the prequel to We Were Liars. This is kind of spoiler alert because we haven't got to We Were Liars yet, but I absolutely loved We Were Liars. And Family of Liars is set on the same sort of island. It follows a really well-off family, how they come together and go to this island every summer, I think it is. And it sort of shows you how, even though the family's well off, they've got their own dark secrets, and you kind of see how corrupt, I guess, this family actually is. I really enjoyed this because I really liked the first one. This is literally set in the same place. It's got the same vibe because it's concentrating on the same family, but it's the parents from We Were Liars when they were kids, if that makes sense. So I'm gonna say that this is a solid 5 stars. I think I would probably still rate it 5 stars now, but this particular one isn't one that I think about a lot. I was just really happy that there was a prequel and that we got to go back to this island and sort of learn more about this family. And then we have Where the Crawdads Sing. I remember this being such a surprise book for me. So in my house we have a bunch of bookcases downstairs, and I literally picked this one off the shelf and I was like, that looks really interesting, and I started reading it and then I just didn't put it down. So this was such a surprise for me because it wasn't a book that I chose, it wasn't a book that I bought, it was just one that I liked the look of, and I literally started reading then and there, and then I didn't put it down. The thing that I really love about this book is her name Kaya? I feel like her name's Kaya, the main girl in it, and I love how we're with her from when she's very young, and it's very much a book surrounding her, how she grows up and evolves and changes as she does, and I just really loved it. I loved the whole setting of it as well. I just loved the whole vibe of this book. The vibe was very new to me at the time, and it's actually something that I've not really seen in other books either. And then there's also the sort of murder mystery element to it as well, which was also a big surprise when I started this because I literally went in having no idea what this was about. But the main girl really carried this book, and I really liked her, and I just felt very connected to her, I think, throughout the whole thing. And this is definitely one that I do still think about, so we're gonna put that in still think about. I wouldn't give it infinite stars, but it is definitely one that I still think about, and I think it deserves more than 5 stars. Next we have The Night She Disappeared by Lisa Jewell. This was my first Lisa Jewell book that I read, and I loved it. It was a book that I read really early on, along with Everything I Know About Love and The Silent Patient. This was the book that made me realise how quickly I can actually read books. When they're as gripping and as hooking as this was, I literally couldn't put it down. And I think it just really made me realise how much I love a thriller, and just how you can really have fun reading when you've got a book that's so gripping. I do think my taste in thrillers has changed a bit. I feel like you can get a thriller that's sort of creepy and you're on the edge of your seat and you're like, what on earth is going to happen? And sometimes they can be a bit darker and a bit twistier. And then I feel like you can get thrillers that are more mystery orientated. They're not as unnerving, and I think I prefer the ones that are creepier and more edge of your seat kind of storyline. I would say Lisa Jewell's books are more on the mystery side. I really enjoy her books, but I do think they're more surrounding the mystery, and I don't think there's as much unnerving sort of twists that we take. So for that reason, I'm gonna put this in probably 4-star in disguise, because I think having read more thrillers, and I think really finding the sort of thrillers that I really like, I don't know whether this would hit the same as it did when I first read it. I would have to reread it to tell, but I still think it's a really good book. But I think it's a 4-star in disguise, and just how much I enjoyed it was what made me give it 5 stars. Next up we have We Were Liars. As I said before, I absolutely love this book. I know this book gets a lot of mixed opinions on it, but I personally loved it. This was one of the first books that I read that was written really differently and sort of poetic and lyrically, and I just love that. I love it. And this is quite a thin book, and it was one of the first books that I was reading so quickly that I thought, I want this to last a bit longer. and I actually slowed down how fast I was reading it because I just didn't want to leave that world. This is also another book that I wish that I could just kind of forget it and reread it for the first time, because I obviously know what happens and the big twist in it I know, and I kind of wish that I didn't know it so that I could re-experience it for the first time again. This is one of my all-time favourite books, if you couldn't tell. So I'm gonna give it infinite stars. It's definitely one that I still think about, and similar to If He Had Been With Me, I really want to reread it and annotate it. Next we have Powerless by Lauren Roberts. This is a newer 5-star book for me. This was actually my first 5-star read of the year. It was my first 6-star read of the year. And the thing is, I don't know how Lauren Roberts has done this, because this was my first fantasy that I ever read and I just absolutely loved it. And while I was reading it, there were things that I would change, and I have got a whole vlog of me reading it where I talk you through all my thoughts and everything throughout reading it. There were things that I would change, but I loved these characters so much that I couldn't not give it 6 stars. And then I'm a real sucker for a book that ends drastically, is the best way I can explain. Like a cliffhanger, but more. Like a heart-wrenching, drastic end. I love a book that can do that. I don't know why, I just feel like to get that much of a reaction out of me, it's like, that must be a good book. But Payden and Kai I absolutely loved. I loved the trial part of this as well, and I actually wish there were more trials, or that we'd got the trials sort of earlier on in the book, but I do get that she had to set it up and everything. I love the whole world. I love the whole concept of everybody having a power, and I love the powers that she's created. It's just all round good vibes, and I'm gonna give this infinite stars. It's one of my favourite books and I loved it. I loved it. Next up we have Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. This is the first one in the Magnolia Parks universe, and this book literally consumed me. I feel like this whole series has taken over my life at this point. I just love it. I love the whole box set. I love the characters. I love how they all feel so real, and they're characters that are flawed. Every single one of these characters is flawed in some way. I feel like every single one will annoy you at times, you'll love them at times. Like, they just feel like such real, well-rounded characters, and that's the thing that I absolutely love about this book. I also love the fact that this whole series plays with my emotions. I feel like I don't know where I stand half the time when I'm reading these, and that's partly what I love. I love the fact that you're rooting for Magnolia and BJ, even though you know you shouldn't. And it's that trope again that I absolutely love that I don't know the name for, which is like soulmates, destined to be together, that kind of vibe. These two characters are just meant to be together, and they literally can't stay away from each other. And the universe just keeps pushing them together, and I love that. So if you couldn't tell already, this is infinite stars. This is one of my favourite books, one of my favourite series, and I just remember finishing the first book and just thinking, what a roller coaster. And little did I know what was ahead of me. The thing is with this book as well, I read the first page, literally the first page, which is the how many loves do you get in a lifetime paragraph, and I was like, I need to get my pens, I need to get my highlighters, I'm going to love this book. And for me to think that from page 1, literally before chapter 1's even started, from that first page, for me to sit there and think, I'm going to love this book, is just... like, how has she done that? How has she done that? Also, the way that these books are written, I love how Jessa Hastings tells the story, and the lyricalness of it. Is that even a word? Probably not. I love how she describes feelings that I've experienced, but I've never known how to properly articulate that. I love how she can get that feeling across, and how you can read something that Magnolia or BJ is feeling and you can think, that's exactly how I felt before. I love how she describes the sort of bond between them and how they have this connection that can't really be explained and neither of them have with anybody else. I just love it. I love it. Okay, next up we have Ward D by Freida McFadden. This is probably one of my favourite Freida McFadden books I've read. I love anything to do with psychology, and not only is this a psychological thriller, but it's also set in a psychiatric ward, which the whole setting of that, the whole vibe is just right up my street. And I read this so quickly, I literally couldn't put it down, and I just loved it. I loved it. I'm gonna say that this is a solid 5-star, because I wouldn't say it was necessarily one that I think about a lot after I've read it, but I did really enjoy it, and it's one of my favourite psychological thrillers that I've read. And I just had a really good time reading this, and it had the right amount of sort of creepiness to it, I think, as well, and sort of unnerving. And it's one of those where you read it and you're like, honestly, who can I trust at this point? Who can I literally trust? And I like that. And the last line of this book is definitely still something I think about. And when I was reading it, I was really hoping that there would be some sort of ending similar to what it was. And that last line was just so good. So good. That's all I'm gonna say. Next up we have Powerful, which is my most recent 5-star read. This is the novella to Powerless, so it comes after Powerless. It follows Adina, who is Payden's best friend, and it follows her at the same timeline as Powerless. So when Payden and Kai are doing their trials, it follows Adina and her love interest, who is Mac. And this book, I went into this book sort of thinking it's going to be good, but it's probably not going to be one of my favourite ever reads, and it's probably not going to match up to Powerless because it doesn't have Payden and Kai in, and it centres around Adina, and we do see a bit of Adina in Powerless, but I feel like we don't really get to see how sweet she is, basically. And also it's a novella, so it's short. I think it's only about 200 pages, and I feel like there's only so much you can do in that amount of time, and only so much you can actually connect with characters in that short amount of time. But wow. Is all I have to say about it. I cannot even tell you how many different emotions this book put me through. I actually did a reading vlog of all my emotions and all my reactions, which is already up if you want to see all my thoughts and everything throughout. But the way that this book played with my emotions, and I wasn't expecting for it to hit as hard as it did because I know what happens in Powerless, but I think the fact that I knew that actually made it hit harder in a way, because I just found that I was getting so attached to her and to Mac, and Mac as a character, I'm obsessed. And I think we really just got to see how sweet Adina is and how just genuinely kind-hearted she is, and just what a pure soul she is. And I love that we got to see her with Mac, and I love that we got a whole backstory to Mac as well. And I also love that they had their own sort of inside little, they're like inside jokes but not, like they're inside little things that they have together. I don't know what you call them. I just absolutely love this, and it does come really close to Powerless in my head. I think I'm gonna put it in Still Think About. Do I give it infinite stars? I think we're gonna go with Still Think About, because I'm also very conscious of the fact that this is my latest 6-star read. So I don't quite know if it's infinite stars yet because I haven't had the time to properly love it as much as the other ones. I don't know if that makes sense, but I don't know yet whether it's one of my all-time favourite books. But I think for now we're going to put in Still Think About. I loved this, if you couldn't already tell, and it's everything I wanted and more. And that's that. Moving on. We have The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. This book I'd heard so much hype about, literally so much hype, and I went in thinking it's a romance at the end of the day. Yes, it's got a lot of hype, but I kind of think when things get so much hype, I feel like I'm kind of a bit more skeptical when I go in, just because I'm kind of like, is it going to match up to all the hype that it gets? But this book, it is so cute. It is one of the cutest books I've ever read. It was one of those books that I just couldn't put down because I just loved them two so much. And I also like that it deals with some really real and hard topics, but it just in such a beautiful way. And I really like that, and I think it makes it into more than a romance. And they're my favourite kind of romances. So I'm going to put this in Still Think About because the little inside jokes between them, the banter that they have, the time travel element to this, just everything, all the vibes. It's just all around good vibes, and I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. And I didn't actually expect it to stick with me, but it definitely has. And it is one that I still think about. Moving on to our next one, we only have 5 left. Next we have In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. This book is another one that I heard a lot of hype about, and it was one of the first sort of dark academia books that I've read. And it's one that has a lot of twists and turns, but the twists make sense, and it didn't feel like I was lost throughout any of it. I did guess who had done it very early on, but the thing that I could never have guessed was how this book ended, and that's what made me give it a 5-star. I felt so empty. That's the only way I could describe it. I felt so just staring at a blank wall, like didn't know what to do with myself, couldn't quite believe what I'd read. There's a part in this that is just so twisted and unnerving in kind of an upsetting way. That makes it sound absolutely horrible. It's not that bad, I promise. But it's just there's one part where I just thought, what on earth have I just read? Literally, what on earth have I just read? But that's not until the very end. So I think this is probably a 4-star in disguise. I really enjoyed it throughout. I think it's probably a 4-star throughout the whole book. And I think it's the ending that is what made me give it a 5-star, which makes me think it's probably more likely 4-star in disguise. But I was just so shocked at the ending, and literally my jaw was on the floor. So we're going to put it in 4-star in disguise. Next up we have The Teacher by Freida McFadden. This book, I didn't expect to love it as much as I did, but I couldn't put it down. I literally could not put it down. I couldn't stop reading it. I think I read it in like under 24 hours, which is just crazy. And I thoroughly enjoyed. What I will say is that now looking back, I think I would probably just read it at the right time for me, but actually looking at the story and looking at the twists and everything, is it 5-star worthy? Questionable. Questionable. I do think there were some questions that I did have when I was looking back at this, and sort of there were some things that were unclear to me. Unclear on what they meant, I think, is the main thing, which is okay in a thriller. I feel like a lot of thrillers do that, where you kind of have to make up your own mind on what it means. But I really enjoyed it. I think I did rate it 5 stars purely on enjoyment level though. So we're gonna put this 4-star in disguise, because I think it's one of those that is a 4-star, but at the time that I read it, it was the exact right book that I read at the exact right time. Because I think I was actually going into a reading slump, and then I picked this one up and I was so happy that I found something that was so fast paced, so gripping. So purely based on enjoyment level, I rated it 5 stars, but I think it's probably 4-star in disguise. Okay, so the 3 books that we have left are all in the Magnolia Parks universe series. So I'm actually going to do this in order the books are. We've already done Magnolia Parks, the first one, so let's do Daisy Hates. Daisy Hates. Where do we even go with this? I absolutely love Daisy and I love Julian, but I think I prefer Magnolia and BJ's story than I do Daisy and Christian's. I love Julian. I love Julian in all the books. Literally all the books. I love him. He's one of my favourite characters. But Daisy, in the first one, Daisy and Christian, I just didn't feel that connected to. I think it's because in the first Magnolia Parks book, I didn't feel very connected to Christian as a character. I remember not really liking him. So then when I found out that Daisy Hates, the first one, concentrated on Daisy and Christian, I kind of wasn't that fussed about Christian. I will say that the whole laundrette washing machine scene is one of my favourites. That scene I definitely still think about. And I really like Daisy and Julian's relationship, and just how they're the only family that each other have got and how they always have each other's backs. But I think even though I probably prefer Daisy as a character to Magnolia, I didn't really love Daisy and Christian's relationship in this first book. So I'm gonna put this one, oh, I don't know. I'm gonna put this as, it's either solid 5-star or still think about. I think we're gonna put it solid 5-star. I think because also as well, I was confused in this book, as in I kind of wanted Daisy and Romeo to be together. That's how much I didn't really like her and Christian together. That's all I'm gonna say. But again, did really like Daisy and Julian. So we're gonna put it solid 5-star. I wouldn't rate it any less than a 5-star. And I do still think about elements of this book, but the book as a whole, probably not. And I also can't really remember how this book ends, which I feel like is saying a lot, because if you've read Jessa Hastings' books, you know she loves a cliffhanger. She loves a drastic, dramatic ending. And that's partly why I absolutely love these books. But the fact that I can't really remember the ending of this one makes me think it didn't stick with me as much as the others. Moving on to Magnolia Parks Long Way Home, which is the 3rd book in the series. This book ripped my heart out. Literally didn't know what to do with myself, couldn't believe what I'd read, and left a massive hole in my heart. And even though there are parts of this book that infuriated me, overall it's one of my favourite in the whole series, and I still think about it. I literally still think about it all the time. And the ending was a killer, literally a killer. So we're gonna put this infinite stars if I could. This book just has my heart. It literally has my heart. And then last but not least, we have Daisy Hates, The Great Undoing. First of all, this is my favourite book cover out of all of the originals, I think. I love that book cover. I think it's stunning. Also, quickly, just before I do this, if you're wondering why Magnolia Parks Into the Dark isn't on here, it's because I actually rated that 4 stars. I think I ended up giving it 4.5, something like that. So it's not actually included in my 5-star ranking video because it didn't get 5 stars. To put it as simply as that. But we have the last one, which is Daisy Hates, The Great Undoing. I loved this. I loved it. This was where I was really on board with Daisy and Christian. I wanted them to be together. I think Long Way Home kind of redeemed Christian in my eyes, and I was actually really excited to see him and Daisy work things out. And I just felt like I was genuinely rooting for them this time round. Also, we can't not mention Julian in this book. If you know, you know. The things that Julian was thinking about Magnolia, the way that this was written was just so beautiful. He has a special place in my heart, honestly. I'm going to say for this last one, I'm going to put this in still think about, because I do still think about it a lot, but it just doesn't give me the same infinite star feeling as the first 2 Magnolia Parks ones do. So that's all my 5 stars that I've given over the past 2 years. That's really exciting. That's really interesting. I'm looking at that now and I'm like, would I put that there? I'm honestly one of the most indecisive people ever, so the fact that I've even been able to narrow these down into different tiers is saying something. But there we have my final tier ranking of every book that I've ever rated 5 stars. I'm happy with that. And this was actually really interesting to do, I feel like, because I think it just shows how your taste does change and evolve, and how sort of excitement about books at the time can affect your rating. And I think even though that's good, because I think it should, and how excited you do feel about it at the time does say a lot, but I think it really shows the books that really stick with you and the books that don't so much. This was really, really fun to do, and let me know if you want me to tier rank anything else. Maybe I could do characters next time, or maybe I could do my lowest rated books. That could be fun. Or my average rated books, like the 3 stars. Let me know if you want me to tier rank anything else, because this is really fun. I love these types of videos. And that brings us to the end of this video. So thank you so much for watching. I really, really hope that you've enjoyed, and I will see you in my next video.